The humid Kentucky air hung heavy, thick with the impending storm. It pressed against my skin, a suffocating blanket in the oppressive summer heat. Cicadas buzzed their monotonous drone, the only sound besides the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. I sat on the porch swing, the rusty chains groaning rhythmically as I pushed off the floorboards. My gaze drifted towards the tree line, the dense woods a dark, ominous wall in the fading twilight. Earlier, my cousin had told a chilling tale about strange lights seen hovering over those very woods, whispers of otherworldly creatures lurking within. I scoffed at the time, but now, with the sun sinking below the horizon and shadows stretching long and distorted, a shiver ran down my spine. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the stillness. It was my aunt, her voice raw with terror. I leapt from the swing, heart pounding in my chest. As I raced towards the house, another shriek, this time from my younger cousin, sent a fresh wave of fear washing over me. Bursting through the screen door, I found the house in chaos. Furniture was overturned, lamps shattered, and my family huddled together, their faces pale and etched with fear. My aunt pointed a trembling finger towards the window, her voice a choked whisper. "It's in the barn. Glowing eyes. It's looking at us." My uncle grabbed his shotgun, his face grim. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice surprisingly steady. He moved towards the back door, gun raised. I couldn't bear to stay put. Curiosity, or perhaps a foolish sense of bravery, propelled me forward. I crept towards the window, peering cautiously into the darkness. The barn loomed in the distance, its silhouette a jagged black shape against the twilight sky. And then I saw them. Two glowing eyes hovering near the barn door, their malevolent gaze fixed on the house. They weren't the eyes of any animal I'd ever seen. They were too large, too intense, and they burned with an eerie, otherworldly light. A cold dread gripped me. Whatever was out there, it wasn't natural. My uncle's shotgun roared, the sound echoing through the night. The eyes vanished. For a moment there was silence, broken only by our ragged breathing. Then, a guttural screech, like nails on a chalkboard, erupted from the darkness, sending another wave of terror through me. The creatures, whatever they were still out there. The next few hours were a blur of sheer terror. We barricaded ourselves inside, the flimsy locks on the doors offering little comfort against the unknown horrors lurking outside. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves against the window pane sent our hearts racing. We huddled together in the living room, the adults whispering in hushed tones, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. Then it happened again. A scratching sound at the window, followed by a soft tap, tap, tap. We froze, our breath catching in our throats. Slowly, I crept towards the window, my uncle's shotgun heavy in my trembling hands. Peeking through the curtains, I saw it. One of the creatures, small and grotesque, with spindly limbs and oversized, luminous eyes, was perched on the window ledge, its clawed hand tapping against the glass. It was like something out of a nightmare, its skin a sickly pale green, its mouth a lipless gash that stretched into a grotesque grin. I raised the shotgun, my finger tightening on the trigger. But before I could fire, the creature vanished. A moment later, we heard a crash from the roof, followed by a series of heavy thumps as the creatures scurried across the shingles. We spent the rest of the night in a state of siege, the creatures appearing and disappearing at random, taunting us with their presence. Each encounter fueled our fear, the creatures seemingly impervious to our gunfire. Their movements were erratic, their appearance unsettling, their intentions utterly unknown. As dawn approached, exhaustion finally overtook us. We collapsed on the living room floor, our bodies trembling, our minds reeling from the night's events. As the first rays of sunlight pierced through the curtains, we dared to hope that the nightmare was finally over. But we were wrong. When we finally ventured outside, we found strange, glowing markings etched into the ground around the house. They were circular patterns, intricate and bizarre, unlike anything we'd ever seen before. A chilling realization dawned on us. The creatures hadn't just been attacking us, they were marking us. And they were still out there, watching, waiting. The sight of those markings sent a chill down my spine that was colder than anything I had felt that night. They weren't random scratches, they were symbols, a language I didn't understand, but one that spoke of something ancient and malevolent. It was as if the creatures had claimed our home, branded it as their own. We couldn't stay there. The thought of spending another night in that house, under the watchful eyes of those things, was unbearable. We packed a few belongings, herded the terrified farm animals into their trailers, and fled. We drove for hours. The unsettling image of those glowing eyes burned into my memory. We ended up at my grandparents' house, miles away, seeking refuge in the familiar comfort of their home. But even there, surrounded by family, the fear lingered. Every shadow seemed to hold a hidden danger. Every creak of the old house sent shivers down my spine. Sleep was impossible. I tossed and turned, haunted by the events of the previous night. The creatures' grotesque faces, their chilling screeches, the feeling of being hunted, it all played on repeat in my mind. The next morning we found them. The markings. They were on the side of the barn, glowing faintly in the morning light. The same intricate patterns, the same eerie symbols. It was a message, a clear and terrifying message. We couldn't escape them. They were following us. Panic set in. We were no longer just dealing with a random encounter, a one-time brush with the unknown. We were being stalked, hunted by something beyond our comprehension. And the worst part was we had no idea why. What did these creatures want? What were those markings? Were they a warning, a threat, or something even more sinister? The questions gnawed at me, fueling the growing sense of dread that settled over our family like a shroud. We were trapped in a nightmare and there seemed to be no escape. We decided to lie low for a while, staying at my grandparents' house, keeping our heads down. But the fear was always there, a constant companion that lurked in the shadows, whispering in my ear. We couldn't shake it off, no matter how hard we tried. One day, as I was exploring the old barn, I stumbled upon a hidden room. Inside, I found a collection of ancient artifacts, dusty tomes filled with arcane symbols, and strange, otherworldly devices. It was as if I had stepped back in time into the heart of a forgotten civilization. I couldn't understand what I was seeing, but I knew it was connected to the creatures, to the markings, to the whole terrifying ordeal. I felt a surge of excitement, a thrill of discovery, but it was quickly overshadowed by a deep sense of unease. I knew I had to tell someone, but who could I trust? My family was already terrified, and I didn't want to add to their fear. I decided to keep it to myself, to wait for the right moment to reveal my findings. But the wait was not to be. The creatures found us again. One night as we slept, I heard a strange noise coming from the barn. I crept downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the barn, I saw it. The creatures were there, their glowing eyes peering through the cracks in the wood. But they weren't just watching. They were gathering around the artifacts, their spindly fingers reaching out to touch them. I knew I had to do something. I raised my voice, shouting for help. The creatures turned towards me, their eyes filled with a malevolent intent. I fired the shotgun, the blast echoing through the barn. One of the creatures screamed, its body convulsing, but the others were undeterred. They surged towards me, their claws outstretched. I ran, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the creatures behind me, their footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. I reached the back door, but it was locked. I was trapped. Just as I was about to give up hope, I heard a familiar voice. It was my uncle armed with his shotgun. He fired and the creatures scattered. I ran out of the barn, my heart pounding with relief. But the danger was not over. The creatures were still out there, watching us, waiting for their next opportunity. We knew we had to leave to find a safe haven. But where could we go? Where could we hide from these relentless pursuers? The answer came in the form of a strange map I found in one of the artifacts. It was a map of an ancient, forgotten city, hidden deep in the heart of the forest. I knew it was our only chance. We packed our belongings and set off, following the map. The journey was long and arduous, but we persevered, driven by a desperate hope of survival. Finally, we reached the city, a hidden gem nestled amidst the towering trees. We entered the city gates, our hearts pounding with anticipation. But as we walked through the streets, we realized that we were not alone. The creatures were there, watching us from the shadows, their glowing eyes glinting in the darkness. We knew we had to fight. We had to defend ourselves, to protect our lives. But we were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. We were just a family, standing against an ancient, malevolent force. The battle was fierce, a clash of wills and weapons. We fought with all our might, but the creatures were relentless. One by one, my family fell, their bodies lying lifeless on the cobblestone streets. I was alone, facing the creatures alone. I knew I couldn't win, but I wouldn't give up without a fight. I raised my shotgun, my finger tightening on the trigger. I aimed at the nearest creature, its eyes filled with malice. I fired, and the creature fell to the ground, its body convulsing. But it was too late. The other creatures surrounded me, their claws outstretched. I knew I was going to die. I closed my eyes, waiting for the inevitable. But then something unexpected happened. A blinding light erupted from the sky, illuminating the city in a dazzling glow. The creatures screamed, their bodies writhing in pain. They fled, disappearing into the shadows. I opened my eyes, blinking in the blinding light. When I could see again, I saw that the creatures were gone. They had been destroyed, annihilated by a force beyond my comprehension. I was safe. I had survived. But at what cost? My family was gone, their lives taken by the creatures. I was alone, haunted by their memories. I knew I had to leave the city, to find a new life, a new beginning. But I would never forget the horrors I had witnessed, the lives I had lost. The creatures would always be with me, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked in the shadows. The city was silent now, the only sound the whisper of the wind through the empty streets. The blinding light had vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind an eerie calm. I wandered through the deserted city, my footsteps echoing off the ancient stone walls. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional skittering of a rat or the flapping of wings as a lone bird took flight. The city was a ghost town, its inhabitants long gone. I found remnants of their lives, broken pottery, rusted tools, faded tapestries, scattered amongst the ruins. It was a haunting reminder of a civilization lost, a culture extinguished. I felt a profound sense of loneliness, a deep ache in my heart for the family I had lost. Their faces swam before my eyes, my aunt's warm smile, my uncle's gruff laugh, my cousin's mischievous grin. I would never see them again, never hear their voices, never feel their embrace. I stumbled upon a small hidden chamber tucked away in the depths of a crumbling building. Inside, I found a collection of scrolls covered in intricate symbols and diagrams. I recognized the markings. They were similar to the ones the creatures had etched on our property. With trembling hands, I unrolled one of the scrolls. It depicted a celestial map with constellations and planets aligned in a pattern I had never seen before. A chilling realization dawned on me. The creatures were not from Earth. They were extraterrestrial beings, visitors from another world. The scrolls spoke of a prophecy, a time of great upheaval when the stars would align and a portal would open, allowing these beings to cross over into our world. The markings, I realized, were not just a claim of ownership, but a beacon, a signal to guide others of their kind. My blood ran cold. The creatures that had terrorized my family were not just random invaders, they were scouts, the vanguard of a much larger force. And they had marked us, not just as their prey, but as a gateway, a point of entry for their invasion. I felt a surge of anger, a burning desire for revenge. But I knew I was powerless against them. I was just one person, a lone survivor against an army of extraterrestrial beings. I left the city, the scrolls tucked safely away in my backpack. I wandered through the forest, lost and alone, unsure of where to go or what to do. The world seemed vast and empty, a desolate landscape devoid of hope. As I walked, I noticed a strange glow emanating from the trees ahead. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I drew closer, I saw a clearing bathed in an ethereal light. In the center of the clearing stood a towering structure, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly energy. It was a portal, a gateway to another dimension. I knew what I had to do. I had to warn the world, to tell them about the impending invasion. But how could I convince them? Who would believe the ravings of a lone survivor, a traumatized teenager with a story too fantastical to be true? I took a deep breath and stepped into the clearing, my gaze fixed on the portal. As I approached, I felt a strange pull, a sensation of being drawn towards the light. I reached out a hand, my fingers brushing against the shimmering surface. Suddenly, the portal flared and a blinding light engulfed me. I cried out, shielding my eyes from the intense glare. When I could see again, I found myself in a strange, alien landscape, a world of twisted trees and glowing flora. I was no longer on Earth. I had crossed over into the realm of the creatures. The air was thick with the stench of decay, the ground beneath my feet spongy and damp. Twisted, luminescent plants cast an eerie glow across the alien landscape, their tendrils reaching out like grasping claws. Above me, a sky of swirling, iridescent colors pulsed with an unnatural light. I felt a sense of overwhelming dread, a primal fear that gnawed at my very core. I stumbled through this nightmarish world, the portal a distant memory. Strange, bioluminescent creatures scuttled across my path, their eyes glowing with an eerie intelligence. I pressed on, driven by a desperate hope of finding another portal, a way back to my own world. Then I saw it. In the distance, a towering structure rose from the alien landscape, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly energy. It was a citadel, a fortress of some kind, its architecture both alien and strangely familiar. I felt an irresistible pull towards it, a sense of destiny that urged me forward. As I approached, the ground began to tremble. The citadel's doors swung open, revealing a cavernous interior bathed in an eerie green light. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The interior was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, each one filled with strange, pulsating machinery. I wandered through the maze, my footsteps echoing off the metallic walls. The air was thick with a humming energy, a palpable sense of power that made my skin crawl. Finally, I reached the central chamber. And there, in the center of the room, stood a massive crystalline structure, its surface covered in intricate symbols. I recognized the markings. They were the same as the ones I had seen on the scrolls, the same as the ones the creatures had etched on our property. As I approached the crystal, I felt a surge of energy, a wave of power that washed over me. I reached out a hand, my fingers brushing against the smooth surface. Suddenly, the crystal flared to life. Images flooded my mind, visions of the creatures' history, their purpose, their ultimate goal. I saw their home world, a dying planet ravaged by war and environmental collapse. I saw their desperate search for a new home, a new world to conquer and exploit. And then I saw the truth. The creatures were not just invaders, they were refugees, desperate to survive. They had been driven from their own world, forced to seek refuge in ours. And they had chosen us, not out of malice, but out of necessity. The markings, I realized, were not a threat, but a plea. They were a desperate attempt to communicate, to warn us of the impending danger. The creatures were not our enemies. They were our allies, trapped in a desperate struggle for survival. But it was too late. We had already attacked them, driven by fear and ignorance. We had become the aggressors, the destroyers. And now they had no choice but to defend themselves. The crystal pulsed with energy, and the citadel began to tremble. I knew what was happening. The creatures were activating the portal, preparing to bring their entire civilization to Earth. They were no longer refugees. They were conquerors, determined to take what was rightfully theirs. I had to stop them. I had to find a way to close the portal to prevent the invasion. But how? I was just one person, a lone survivor against an army of desperate beings. As the citadel shook around me, I noticed a small, inconspicuous panel on the side of the crystal. I pressed it and the crystal's glow dimmed. The trembling subsided. I had done it. I had deactivated the portal. But my victory was short-lived. The creatures swarmed into the chamber, their eyes glowing with rage. They had seen me, their saboteur, their enemy. I knew I couldn't fight them. I was outnumbered, outmatched. But I had one last card to play. I raised my hands, palms open, in a gesture of surrender. I spoke to them in their own language, the language I had learned from the scrolls. I told them I understood their plight, their desperation. I told them I wanted to help. The creatures paused, their eyes filled with confusion. They had never encountered such compassion, such understanding from a human. I continued to speak, my voice echoing through the chamber. I told them about Earth, about our own struggles, our own hopes and dreams. I told them that we could coexist, that we could find a way to share this world. The creatures listened, their eyes widening in surprise. They had never considered such a possibility. They had always seen humans as a threat, as an obstacle to their survival. But now they saw us in a new light. The leader of the creatures stepped forward, its eyes filled with a glimmer of hope. It spoke to me in halting English, its voice filled with gratitude. It thanked me for my understanding, for my willingness to help. We worked together, the creatures and I, to find a solution. We devised a plan to share the Earth, to coexist peacefully. We would help them rebuild their civilization, and they would help us protect our own. The creatures returned to their home world, taking with them the knowledge that humans were not their enemies. They left behind the markings, not as a threat, but as a symbol of our newfound alliance. I returned to Earth a changed person. I had seen the darkness, the desperation, the fear, but I had also seen the hope, the compassion, the possibility of peace. I knew that the future would be challenging, that there would be obstacles and setbacks, but I also knew that we could overcome them together. We had found a way to coexist, to share this world, to build a better future for all. And as I looked up at the stars, I knew that we were not alone.